I turned 49 today. 49, I'm 1 year away from 50. Age is just a number. I don't feel 49 in that weird way like I feel old. I feel 49 the way a clinically depressed person feels like I should have had so much more figured out by now. Like, 20 years ago, I should have been pretty much figured out. But the one thing I can tell you about right now, today on my birthday, is I can tell you that I don't have everything figured out. I don't know that everybody does. I think the it that we have to have figured out, I think they moved so many of the posts on it. When it was the 40s and 50s, there was kind of a really set it. But it's almost like, remember when you were younger and there was like hardly anything to watch on TV, and so we'd all just sort of watch whatever was on TV, right? So if you went back and looked at things like the Flintstones and you said, you know what's a really good idea for a cartoon to watch? Let's watch a bunch of people recreate The Honeymooners, which, was a classic comedy show. Why don't we recreate that for the dinosaur age? Because kids will dig that. Kids love comedy reenactments of comedy shows that they didn't really watch and that are going to be about dinosaur stuff, right? I think that why it's hard to figure out, who we want to be when we grow up these days, what our lives are like, what matters to us, why suddenly so many people are embracing the fact that they are trans or gay or bi or all these things that you're seeing that are now furries, etc., which I don't put in the same category, and I could be bigoted and wrong for, who knows. But there are all these things that people can be or can identify as that weren't so much an option way back when. There's a lot of ways we can do what we do. It used to be, you go to school, then you either go to work or you go to college. And if you go to college, you're going to college because you're going to be the boss. And that's how it went. And a whole bunch of people went into the military. There was a lot more people in the U.S. who went to military service earlier. We got a resurgence of that. But, what our path was going to be, there were fairly limited amount of paths, right? And so now we grew up in a world where there's 7-year-old YouTubers making $12 million a year. There's a bunch of 50 and 60-year-olds who can't afford to retire when 65 comes. There are a bunch of people who are 70 and 80 who are starting to make $2 to $4 million on YouTube. And you and I aren't making any kind of big YouTube money. And so we're like, well, I guess that's not going to work for us. So now what? And, the weirdest part is that real jobs barely sustain anybody. Like a regular job, like, 60, 70,000 a year US dollars isn't enough for almost anybody's life anymore. And that's crazy too, right? Like it just used to not be this way. It used to be that there were these very limited choices. Your limited job choices would cover those limited life choices. And we're all just kind of going to roll along until we were dead. This has nothing to do with talking about our dreams, our passion, our creativity, or anything else. There's just a lot more things that we can do. And so it's a really interesting time because we psychologically are really trying to kind of model ourselves on systems that no longer work the same way and don't exist the same way they used to. And we are trying to guide ourselves towards a future that no longer exists that same way. And so we suddenly have massive amounts of variables. If you ever walked into a restaurant, this happens to me sometimes when I'm traveling. Do you ever go into a restaurant? It has to be like a nicer place where there's a lot of questions and you just want your meal. Like, you sit down and like, can you get you a drink? You say, how about water? They say still or sparkling. You say sparkling and they say Perrier, San Pellegrino, or some other brand, right? Like, you're just like, I just want water. And you go crazy because there's just so many restaurant options. Life is like that at every turn right now. And the beauty is that we can really get what we really want. Go back to what I was saying about gay and trans and bi and all that. It was not okay. It was very not okay societally to express those opinions of views of love and explain that's who you really were. Your identity was not okay to mainstream society. And now it is much more seen as okay. I have a gay kid, I have a trans kid, I am super on board and super into love is love. And I know that there's parts of society that aren't. What I'm saying is, it's now a lot more okay to express that in society than it was before. An easier, slightly less nervous kind of version of that. When I was growing up, I was a total nerd. I was into video game stuff and whatever, and it was not cool. And you had to kind of not talk about it much at school if you ever thought you might want to date another person. And so nowadays, you could go to school wearing the most nerdy things in the world, and you'll be praised by your schoolmates. In fact, if you don't know anything about anime or something, you're probably ostracized. So life's changed a lot. It's so much for the better, but we have to give ourselves a break and accept that there's no way to know where we want to be when we grow up. And the worst thing to think is, how come it can't be like the past? Like, nobody wants the past. The past had bigotry and racism and all kinds of terrible stuff. The present has it, but we're exposing it, right? But the present requires a lot more configuration work. We want things to be exactly our way, and that is beautiful, but we have to configure things to be that way. And by the way, if you're like, I just want the world to do everything for me, you get the worst of all things. You get it's like picking the defaults in every single part of a video game. You get the worst possible version of everything if you just say, I want the world to do it for me. You have to make a conscious effort and move forward. Some things I want to remember at age 49. I'm so in love with Jacqueline and my kids. I'm so in love with my parents. I am grateful for all the opportunities that I get. I'm always working on interesting and fun projects. I'm right on the verge of getting a new book written, and that's important to me because I've been so laggard at this, and it's just taken me a while. But this one I feel like is going to be worth the delay. I'm in a much better spot with my depression right now. That's since November of last year, so that's good. And I guess the other things I want to remember, just to have this on video, is that having a chance to talk with you and talk about things like what bothers you and how to retrofit you as a human into this crazy digital space, that's my big work right now. That's what I'm working on. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the chance I get to work with you. So thanks so much for taking part and listening, and I'm glad. And I look forward to catching up with you sometime in the following year.